We want to welcome you back to another edition of Political Breakfast on WABE. We are so glad you're here and listening. With me are our strategists, Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson and Republican strategist Brian Robinson. On a somber note, we've been chatting about and have been talking about since it happened last week, the shooting in Barrow County that robbed students and teachers of their lives.
Yeah, I think that, Lisa, it's just such a tragedy. I really want to talk today not just as a Democratic strategist or a small business owner or entrepreneur. I'm really today talking as a concerned parent that I live in a state where there's literally permissive gun laws, constitutional carry, where anyone and everyone has access to guns. And there is no state law, no local laws in place to put in guardrails or precautionary measures to make sure that women and men, and now children, young adults, a 14-year-old boy that in this state can get a gun and be passed over and allowed to stay at a home that was clearly broken. This was a young man who had only been at this high school for a few days. This is a 14-year-old boy who was cited as being a participant or allegedly a participant in some type of activity to plot and plan a mass shooting. Law enforcement interrogated his home, himself and his parents. And then his father, who was arrested, first time in history that Georgia has had this go into effect. And I know Republicans are going to praise themselves that they passed the law to do it. But the fact is that that's a law, honestly, Lisa, that I really wish that we didn't have to enforce in Georgia, right? So we got to be very careful about, how we sort of boast and brag about what has happened. I'm very concerned. I am scared. I held my son, Tyson, who's 4, a little longer that night when I got the news. I talked to him a little longer and told him I loved him probably 4 or 5 more times than I usually tell him because I don't take him to school every morning. I depend on my mother-in-law to do it. And so every parent right now is terrified.
What a shame. You can't send your kids to school, anymore. Well, there used to be a time that there was a relief. Okay, they're at school. I know where they are for the next 8 hours and everything's okay. But, and Brian, you can attest to this as well. I mean, that safety net is gone.
When I grew up I was in school largely in the 1980s, there were plenty of guns in America, and there were plenty of guns in the community, the rural community where I grew up. But it never crossed my mind. We used to do these drills in case the Soviets nuked us. And we would go and you would go in the hallway, and it was kind of the same thing you would do in a tornado drill. You got to put your head up against the concrete wall, kind of in a fetal position. But we were worried about nuclear war in a way that wouldn't cross the minds of school children today, perhaps, whereas it never would have occurred to us that one of our peers may come in with a lethal weapon and efficiently and effectively kill many of us. And I think that's a terror that is much closer to home because none of us has lived really through the stuff that I trained for as a kid. But many American children, now adults, many of them now adults, have lived through this most horrible of traumas. But one thing that I want to circle back to there is we've always had a lot of guns in this country. We are unique in that way. It goes back to our founding. It was put in the Constitution. And today we have over 330 million guns in America. And I think this is something that, as we're looking for common ground, and Tharon and I have sought common ground. He mentioned hugging Tyson. He and I were live on air talking about this on Thursday on WABE, and I had to stop my sentence midway, and he had to finish my sentence because I cannot talk about my daughter in this context. It is just too upsetting for me as a parent. But as we seek common ground, I think one thing that no one wants to talk about is the fact that we have these 330 million guns out there, and to really make a difference, you would have to go a route that would be unacceptable in this country, and that would be a mass buyback or a confiscatory regime that made sure that the government knew where all these guns were, who had them, how many you had, and then decided which ones of those guns they were going to take back and melt. That's not something that America is ready to do. And I think that's a huge dividing line between the two parties, because the stuff that Democrats see as common sense gun reform, Republicans, or at least gun rights conservatives, feel like that's just a stepping stone, because what the Democrats are proposing isn't going to change it. And so the next step is going to be confiscation once that plan doesn't work. So that's sort of the dividing line in this country. So we do need to talk about the things like school safety, resource officers, mental health screening, and access. These are things where maybe we can find some common ground and make. And look, resource officers saved lives. So we can say we have done a reform that made a difference. It didn't save everybody. 4 is too many. 4 is for too many.
Let me say this. I respectfully disagree with Brian, because what we're doing in the state right now is not working. And I'm a Second Amendment supporter. I'm a responsible gun owner. All right. If it goes back to responsible gun ownership, clearly what happened in Wanda Barrow was an irresponsible gun owner, and there was indicators in place. People were warned. People were interviewed, and they ignored it. Right. I mean, there was an investigation, but this young man at 14 years old was in a broken home, and it was an impoverished area. A lot of mental health issues involved. Drugs were involved. And the fact that we put all this pressure on the schools, all right, that's essentially, when we say there's nothing that we can do, or, the country is not there yet. No, B-Rob, I respectfully disagree, man. People are just scared to speak up and say something. It is hatred that exists in this country. It is hatred that Donald Trump and the Republican Party, people who support him, we just witnessed it recently this morning at Atlanta Press Club event, where you have a majority of people that represent the Republican base of the Republican Party who are still spreading lies and trying to divide this country. And so I think that, we try not to bring partisanship into it, but the truth of the matter is, Lisa, and I called out Republicans and Democrats on Georgia King. All right, let me be very clear. I said that if Republicans and Democratic leaders, governor, lieutenant governor, speaker, if they do not make this a number one priority today, don't go to the Eggs and Issues breakfast at Georgia Chamber and sit up there and say that you're going to do something about it, and then wait it out for the session, and it ends in April, and you don't do anything about it. Because Republicans are in control at the state. All right, we have a Republican state school board superintendent. All right, I mean, this goes all the way down the list. And so Republicans and Democrats have got to step up. And I just don't think we can just do the whole my thoughts and prayers and condolences to the families. That's old, man. And so the parents I've talked to, the folks over in the Athens community, the Wanda Barrow, Bethlehem, which is right next door, they're terrified and they're angry. And they feel that the system failed them. All right, the system failed them. You had a investigation in place that this could have been prevented. Now, let's talk about these school resource officers. We need to thank the resource officers. Now, some Republicans, and not Brian, have said, resource officers can't, solve it. But right now, we are in the state of Georgia, Lisa, we have vacancies. And yes, the money has dwindled down from the state. I think it was, $45,000, $50,000. But if you are a superintendent right now, or local school board, for what I'm hearing, is that it's hard to recruit even people to get these jobs, Lisa. And so in this podcast, what we need to talk about is solutions. I know that's where you're trying to get us to go.
Well, yeah, we're talking about that gun buyback. And, the notion of a gun buyback, I mean, I don't know. It just seems overwhelming. How would that work, and would it work? And I know Senator Raphael Warnock was posed that question on national TV over the weekend, and here's what he had to say.
Clearly, there's a disconnect between what the people, the American people, want and what they're able to get out of their government. Again, 87% of Americans believe in background checks, and yet I hear politicians say that it's not guns who kill people, it's people who kill people, and yet we don't even want to know who those people are. We won't even support.
Senator, just yes or no, though, should she support the mandatory buyback program? Just a yes or no.
Listen, look, as a pastor, I've done buyback programs. You can pick this issue or that issue. But I think that, again, there's not one single thing that will make all of this go away.
Okay, so you heard it. He really didn't answer the question. I don't know. What's the takeaway from that?
Well, he answered a lot of questions before that question was posed to him at the end of the clip. So what you just played is a 30-second clip of probably a 6-minute interview. You know, me and Brian, we do national TV. You've done national TV, Lisa. And so the Republican Party, which the clip you just played, is a Trump platform. And so if I can just go cut up Trump speeches and only take out 20 or 30 seconds, I can make the American public believe what I want to believe. But what the senator said
which
was,
the Democrats do
with
the bloodbath quote. Yeah.
I said I can do it. All right, so I'm a Democrat, and sometimes, you know, people in my party do that. It's a fear tactic, Lisa. Mm-hmm. The Republicans are putting this out because they want now their response to this mass killing in Barrow County, right, is Democrats are going to take your guns. It should be, I'm going to do everything I can as a Republican candidate for president, that we got to look at everything. And just don't go up there and create a hashtag and offer your condolences and prayers. So I think the senator was very smart to not take the bait, because that was a trap and he didn't walk into it. So thank you, Senator Warnock, for representing this Harris-Walz ticket and not taking trouble. But what he talked about before that, and I encourage everyone to go back and look at the interview, he talked about how we need to be stronger when we look at AR-15 platform guns, which was used to kill these 4 innocent lives at the high school. He also talked about how we need to do more background checks. We're going to talk about this a little later. Red flag laws, right? This could have been avoided in Georgia. And then right now we had a bill in the legislature that will incentivize gun owners to purchase lot boxes, right? Safe gun ownership, again, responsible gun ownership. And it never made it to the governor's desk. And this, I think, was like a $200, $300 incentive to kind of get people to do that. And so Republicans' answer can't be Democrats are going to take your guns away. Now, in order for that federal legislation to happen, yeah, Lisa, it's going to be tough to get that passed because, you know, it's such a tight margin. But I think the American public is looking for answers. And mark my word that this murder, this mass shooting, which I think is number 45 that we've had in this country since the start of the year, is going to change the trajectory of Georgia politics from this day forward.
Brian, what was your major takeaway from Senator Warnock's comments?
Well, I think we all agree that he didn't address the answer directly. And I think what that shows us, what that tells us is very instructive, is even Senator Warnock, who is a fairly liberal senator, he likes to talk about being the 16th most bipartisan, which is great. But I think at his heart, he is a real progressive. And the fact that he won't say, yeah, we should get these guns off the street and buy them back, just goes to show how politically tricky this is. That is not a consensus in America, even in Georgia, a Georgia that elected 2 Democrats to the U.S. Senate. So it gets really tricky really quick. Now, Tharon mentioned something that I'm interested in, the safe storage measures. I'm all for that. I think most Republicans are for that. I think it got lost in the legislative mix last year. To Tharon's point, I do think it's going to be top of mind going into the 2025 session. I talk to state legislators every day, and let me tell you, we are calling around to different parts of the country in red states, to be fair, to say, you know, this happened to y'all. What did you do in the aftermath? What was effective? What is politically doable? So I can guarantee you there's going to be a movement led by Republicans, hopefully joined by many Democrats to get some of this done. I don't know if we have codified the parental responsibility aspect of this. I know that the father in this case has been arrested. I think Georgians universally agree with that arrest. I mean, whether you hate guns or love guns, you think, what in the world were you thinking giving an AR to a kid that the FBI had to come investigate? I mean, it's absolutely bonkers. I can't even put myself into the mind of somebody who would do that. So if that's not in the law, that there is a parental responsibility when it comes to access to deadly weapons in a home where there are children, then I think that's something that we need to look at for sure.
We were all at a breakfast this morning at Atlanta Press Club where they had members of the Democracy Defense Project here. And it included some former heavy hitters here in Georgia, former Governor Roy Barnes, Nathan Deal, Senator Saxby Chambliss, and Mayor Shirley Franklin. And they were asked the question about how they felt about the shooting. And the majority said that elected officials need to get involved at this point. Is that your feeling moving forward? I know it's been talked about, gun legislation here and there, but does it really need to be ramped up at this point? Tharon, I'll start with you.
Well, what former Governor Will Barnes said, Lisa, is that we need to really ban assault weapons. He called them machine guns. I mean, he made a really good sort of correlation with him being a responsible gun owner. I'm going to continue to say that. We all need to be responsible gun owners. And he has shotguns, and he even mentioned he had a pistol, but he likes to go dove and quail hunting, right? And he made a good point. You know, I don't necessarily need an AR-15 or AR platform gun to go hunt. But I think what's also very interesting of what the others said, and what I heard them say is exactly what you said, which is why I called them out on Georgia Gang last week, is that if this is not a top priority for Democrats and Republicans, not just at the state level, but even on a federal level, I want to hear more from our congressional delegation, right? Particularly the Republican members, who I know they're probably all giving statements. Let me not say they haven't talked about the mass shooting. But who's going to step up? Which woman or man in both parties are going to step up and unify on this issue? You know, Lucy McBath, Congresswoman Lucy McBath, we cannot talk about this and not talk about her, right? Is being out there alone, fighting for sensible gun reform in this country, right? And particularly in this state. But I want to go back to something real quick that Brian was touching on. And I want to just let our viewers know this, that there's literally 4 pieces of legislation right now in this Republican control legislature. All right. You can be around, know I'm a lobbyist. You can't get anything done in the session unless you have Republican and Democratic support. But most times, even for it to get on the agenda, even for it to be a priority, you have to have Republican buy-in. But right now, there was an effort to punish gun owners who allow unsupervised children to access their firearms, and it reached a hearing in 2023 and went no further. Then a Senate study committee is reviewing an effort to revive it in 2025. I think that's one thing that we can do. We also talked about red flagging laws. This is something that I think has bipartisan support. Had we had a stronger even just a law that could even address what happened in Barrow County in place, I think that those red flag laws would have been in place. And what this does, Lisa, is that it temporarily, all right, don't Democrats and independents who listen to this podcast, don't let the Republicans fool you. We're not Democrats. We're not for you permanently taking away somebody's gun just in GP, the general purpose. No, but if they've been red flagged and they're going through a mental health crisis or they're being evaluated, and like in this case at this high school where this 14-year-old boy had been investigated, then there needs to be a temporary period where the guns need to be removed while we complete the process. And then you can get that gun back if you feel that you've passed all the tests and everything. So these are just things that we can do right now. And a shout out to Antonio Lewis. We've talked about him on this podcast, city councilman in Atlanta, who literally got the city of Atlanta to agree to give out free lock boxes. And we've heard from Chief Shearbaum, who's our chief here in Atlanta, who says that the number one reason why people break into cars is to steal guns. And I know that that's a concern that the legal gun owners like myself want to be able to protect ourselves. But again, these guns that are AR platform are getting into the hands of young boys, particularly a majority of them are white boys that are committing these mass shootings in this country, and they're using them to kill people and to exude hatred. And that's the truth about what's really going on here. And we got to really be able to speak truth to power.
Any fast fixes, though? You know, that's what I want to hear. What's a fast fix to all of this?
I don't think there's a fast fix. And that's not to say that it shouldn't be a goal. It shouldn't be a priority. It should. And as I said, I do think this is going to be top of mind with Republicans going into the next session. You know, one thing we have to remember, too, is we talk on this show about Georgia because that's our niche. And there are a million other places to talk about federal politics. And we're one of the few places you can go to talk about Georgia. And on the state level, an assault weapons ban, which Governor Barnes was talking about today, isn't something that would be feasible. I mean, they just come in from the state next door, right? It would not make a difference if it's on the state level. That's something that, you know, Bill Clinton did that as president. It was a 10-year assault weapons ban. That's something that had to be done at the federal level. I will say, just as an observer of the process, Republicans are not going to get on board with that. You'll have to get like a filibuster-proof majority in order to do that. And the red flag laws that Tharon was referencing, this is such a sticky wicket because obviously, if you have a friend if you have anyone in your life who is being abused domestically by a partner or is being stalked and is in fear of their life, maybe has had a gun flashed at them, of course you want that person who is doing it disarmed and defanged to some degree, made a little less dangerous. At the same time, a lot of people who distrust government processes would be scared that the government would use it as a way to disarm political enemies. Oh, that person's mentally ill. I don't know where that line is. I know I don't want that abuser to have a gun. I know I want our vulnerable citizens to be protected. I don't have an answer, but I do know that we don't have consensus on it between the parties.
Lisa, I want to, real quick, give me 15 seconds. I want to speak to Democrats who listen to this podcast, and I'm not elected, but let me tell you what I would do if I was elected right now. You don't have to wait on a Republican to figure it out. Yes, Brian, that's very great that, and I know you're very involved in this, y'all calling around the country and trying to find best practices, right? And you're doing that because you want to figure out states who actually were able to work with Democrats to get it done. If I was a Democrat elected official right now, I would be leading on this issue, right? I would take these 4 issues. We also have our version of what we call the Alyssa's law, right? I want to make sure that people get educated on this podcast. This was a law initiative to require public schools to install panic alarms to silently notify law enforcement. I think that, we did have a badge, and I think some cases a watch. But Lisa, I don't want to gloss over, get into the politics that we ignore and don't give proper due to the brave citizens of Georgia, these brave Americans of Apalachee High School, the faculty and staff, that the minute that this gun was shot, that they went to action, notifying the authorities. And shout out to the authorities. Democrats sometimes get criticized that we don't believe in police and law enforcement. When I'm going to say this as a Democrat, thank you to the authorities who showed up within minutes, locked down that school. And of course, we've talked about the 2 resource officers, how they handled the process. They saved, I was told by law enforcement officers, Lisa, there could have been another 20 plus lives that would have been lost. And probably upwards of 30 plus people who would have been injured because of the proximity where he had the gun, where he started shooting, and for them to de-escalate the situation and get him to surrender. I mean, just shout out to that school system there and their multi-jurisdictional sort of cooperation and utilizing that. But we can go further. And that's what I would do if I was a Democrat right now. I would be on this issue, Democrat elected official. I would be talking about this. There's no place that any Republican leader would go in this state. Just like how we just got harassed at this Atlanta Press Club event by this Republican who's a member of the MAGA party, clearly, and Republican came and interrupted a program that was going fine right now. That was inappropriate. I don't believe in that, but I do believe in free speech. I believe in First Amendment. There should not be a place that a Republican, I'm talking about fundraisers, UGA game, they all at the UGA game. Y'all want to see them? They're all down in Athens on a Saturday, right? You Democrats, we should be making this a priority. And it's going to take that type of advocacy, Lisa, because I don't believe they're going to act. I believe that we got the speakers doing the right thing. He's saying the right thing. The governor, definitely, lieutenant governor. But I'm talking about the people on these committee levels. Democrats, who's going to step up?
Yeah, so some good points there, Tharon. And we should pay homage to those resource officers. So Brian, if you will, if you want to speak their names, they certainly do deserve it.
Yeah, it was Brandon King and Tanner Good are the names of the resource officers there at Apalachee High School. God bless them. They saved lives. They're great Americans. They are what we expect of resource officers after the tragedy at Uvalde where the resource officer didn't act for so long and people died. So God bless these guys. And can I also just say that the sheriff there in Barrow County has just hit every tonal note perfectly. My dad and mom go to church with him at Winder First Baptist. He's a deacon there. And my dad was saying, like, what you see, that emotion, that rawness, that compassion for his community, that is not put on. It is not an act for the cameras. That is who that guy is. And he is hurting, and he wants to serve his community the best he can. So shout out to that guy, too. And the GBI director, Halsey, obviously has been on the scene and pitch perfect throughout all of this as well. I'm sure was involved in the decision. And this had to be a decision by law enforcement to arrest the father. That has not always been the obvious thing to do in the past. This is something that they had to agree upon. And move swiftly. And now that guy's been in court, and we've all seen those images.
And they move swiftly.
So I think our law enforcement on the state level, on the local level, have done very well. And Tharon mentioned the security, the watch. This case, it was the watches. Other people do have the badges. A teacher was able to hit the watch and get the police there really fast. Last year, the state budget put $50,000 per school, in addition to that $45,000 for the resource officers for security upgrades. I don't know if that $50,000 went to that watch system that saved the day or helped so much last week, but if it did, that's exactly what it's intended for, and I think you'll be seeing more efforts like that.
Yeah, and our hearts still go out to the lives that were lost and the families who are dealing with that pain today. Tonight is the first debate of more to come between presidential nominees Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Do you think this is going to be the forefront of is this going to take priority during the debate tonight? Gun safety, gun control, and protecting our students. Tharon?
Absolutely. And again, Lisa, it's a shame that this has to be the leading sort of topic at a presidential debate. But this issue is so important. I think it is the preeminent issue because it affects so many things. It affects life. It affects schools. Technology is involved. Guns are involved. Families are involved. Teachers, which is the most noble job that anyone can have, is involved. So you can't not talk about this at the debate today. But what's going to be very clear is how does the American public feel about what they're going to hear? Because you're going to have a vice president who's currently in a role right now that can work with the President Biden, and the Congress to get something done. You have a former president who will say what he would have done or what he did when he was in president. So I think that what Vice President Kamala Harris has got to do, number one, Lisa, she's got to make it plain, as my grandmother would say. She's got to talk to the parents, right? She's got to talk to the kids. She's got to really make some sensible sense out of this because they all use the word senseless, and it is senseless. And so I think she's got to be strong, and she's got to talk about what the Biden-Harris campaign has done and on the Biden-Harris efforts to move towards a better way of monitoring assault weapons in this country. That's a highlight that she'll talk about. That's legislation that she's actually been able to work on. And then I think the other thing that's going to come up today, of course, is going to be border security. I did some quick stats, believe it or not, contrary to what Republicans want you to believe. It is still a crisis. It's not where it should be, but the border security is getting better at the border. So she's going to have to really talk about that. She's going to talk about the economy. She has a really good program out right now that strengthens the middle class, the role that the union workers will play, but also she's going to have to talk about entrepreneurship. And then lastly, she's going to have to make the clear distinction between her and her opponent, and that is that she wants to grow the economy. She wants to grow programs that's going to help the American people. And Republican candidate Donald Trump wants to take programs away. And then lastly, look, Lisa, you know this, and I've said this, there's sexism that exists in this country. So the other thing that she's going to be looked at is how does she present in her nonverbals, right? When he starts to attack her, when he starts to lie, when he starts to try to distort her record, say that she's not black and say that she didn't do this and do that, right? I mean, these are things that he said, right? He's inferred it. How does she maintain her composure? But I think she will do that, Lisa, well, because this woman is prepared for this moment. She's trained. She's a great lawyer, district attorney, U.S. senator, now vice president. The main thing I think that the American people are going to see is that she's going to be able to really give a lot of details when it comes to her policy. And whereas I think she will clap back on Donald Trump when he starts to avoid questions or try to just basically lie again, like he did at the first debate.
What messaging do you think Donald Trump will bring to the table, Brian, tonight?
I think what you'll see him do when it comes to that is talk about other public safety issues as well. And of course, the border issue is one of those. That's something you've seen the Republicans really seize upon. Crimes committed by people who entered the country illegally, support for police versus a party that just a few years ago was talking about defunding them. So there's some public safety messages in here that he can really pick up upon. If I was him, what I would do is prosecute the case between the person who was appointed as the nominee versus the one who was running for the nomination in 2019. The CNN interview where she said that my values haven't changed, that doesn't hide the fact that her policy positions have changed fairly radically, and she really hasn't personally disavowed those positions. It was, staffers leaking out policy position changes on a Friday night. And my values haven't changed. I think that is an area of attack for Donald Trump here, to make her choose between the left of her party and this move toward the center that she has done. And I will say, I've said here before, I think she pivoted to the center very effectively during that convention. She spoke to issues that independents and moderate Republicans or Trump disaffected Republicans would be like, yeah, I agree with her on Ukraine. Yeah, I agree with her on NATO. I love to hear her have a patriotic message. I love to hear the appeals to heaven to some degree, the religiosity of what we saw in the convention. It was an appeal to something different than the left of the party. Make her choose between those two. That's what I would want to see from him. But obviously the top two issues are the economy and the border. Those are ones where voters trust Donald Trump more than Kamala Harris. But I think Donald Trump needs to make sure that he sticks to those issues. Tharon hinted at the talk about whether she's an Indian or whether she's a black woman. I hope and pray that none of that is discussed. That is irrelevant to voters. It turns voters off. I think that we can have a serious policy debate. Democrats like to make fun of Donald Trump and kind of question his intelligence in a lot of ways. But when it comes to policy, you know where he stands, and there is substance behind all of the theater, and there's a lot of theater, and I don't deny that. You know what he stands for when it comes to border security, when it comes to trade issues, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to public safety. So use that as a foundation to build off of. People know where you are. They trust you on those top issues. Stick to that. Be serious and have a vision for America.
All right. I want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Political Breakfast. A lot unfolding this week regarding the Barrow School shooting and, of course, the debate taking place tonight. And we'll pick up where we left up come Thursday. So I hope you'll join us again then.
Falcons
Thanks,
fans,
guys.
Don't panic. All right. Listen. Listen. No.
I was afraid. I saw all the Pittsburgh Steeler fans in town. I was afraid to look at the score. And when I did, I was like, oh, well.
I lost a bet. That to Lori Geary.
Did you?
Yes. So I will. So I know Lori listens to this podcast.
Oh gosh.
I will be waving a terrible towel on Georgia game when I next appear.
Okay.
But I would say this to Falcons fans.
No, they look terrible.
Do not panic. All right. I'm upset. Everybody's hurt.
Did they look good? Did they at least look good?
No, they didn't
look good at all.
But but
Okay.
we're gonna be fine. But these next three games are pivotal because we go to Philly. Kansas City comes to town, then we play
Kansas
the
City
Eights.
is going to be
it's going to be
Donald
tough.
Trump
Yeah,
says
don't
about
panic,
the auto
guys.
industry or Biden, the bloodbath. Let's just go ahead and prepare for that. And thank you to the Commerce Club for allowing Lisa and I, and maybe Tharon if he's around here in the building, to let us sit here and tape after the Atlanta Press Club event. We appreciate your hospitality.
We're on the 49th floor. Theron's on the 33rd.
And Lisa, congratulations to you. You just won a big award. Share with our listeners what that award is.
Yeah, Lily and I, we did a feature story on a growing pond in East Point where a lot of the local residents grow their own food.
Fantastic.
And so it was just a nice little feature. Awesome. And we're just delighted that it won a Gabby Award.
Congratulations.
Thanks. All right, guys. See you soon.
Bye. Have a great week.
Thank you.